guys, so today we're going to do something different from my other videos. You see, most of my other videos are talking about health and well-being, dealing with food and the like, but we're actually going to talk about spirituality and religion in this video. That's actually why I'm interviewing my friend Solace here about the Bahá'í Faith. And what makes the Bahá'í Faith interesting is that it's a relatively new religion. There's no like ancient scripts, lost in translation issues. We actually know what the people who were part of the faith and finding the faith, what they actually meant. So that makes it very interesting. Also, relatively recently, several news outlets reported that it is the second largest religion in South Carolina, which is, I wasn't aware of that, so I find that fascinating as well. But before we actually get to me asking him some questions and interviewing him, let's see if my friend Solace has anything to say about introducing the faith.
Yeah, so basically before we get started, I just wanted to say that what I say here does not necessarily reflect what the Bahá'í Faith is about and the core beliefs. I've been a Bahá'í for many years, but I want to maybe have people use this as a starting point to do their own research, to make their own interpretations.
So you do not represent every single Bahá'í?
No, I do not represent every single Bahá'í.
That would be pretty crazy.
It would, you know, yeah.
So let's get into it. So we're going to get into the first question I have for my friend Solace here, and that is, when did the Bahá'í Faith come into existence?
Well, the Bahá'í Faith started as one might consider one of the Messianic movements, the sort of religions and movements that were waiting for the return of Christ, or the return of the promised one in Islam. The Bahá'í Faith began in 1844 with the Bahá'í Faith, and that was a religion started by a man whose title was the Bab, which means the gate. And the whole point of the Bahá'í Faith was sort of twofold. The first, to basically say that all the major religions, if humanity had really followed what any of them had said throughout any part of history, we would be okay. But we don't, and we keep messing it up. And the second part is that the promised one of all religions is coming and is on his way and will be here very soon. And Baha'is believe that that person founded the Bahá'í Faith. So we began with the Bahá'í Faith in 1844, and that's when Baha'is count the beginning of the Bahá'í Faith.
So if I was a Christian, I would say that you were kind of saying that Christ is like the person that you're following, but not Christ?
So, the person that founded the Bahá'í Faith, his title is Baha'u'llah.
Okay.
That's a title, and his title means the glory of God. And Baha'is believe that Baha'u'llah is the second coming of Christ.
The second coming of Christ. So
yes,
we're actually dealing with an entity that is God?
Not that is necessarily God. Baha'is believe in one God, one specific deity, who is singular and by himself, or itself. We believe that this being is a spirit, has no gender, but in all of our writings, it's just him. So,
just to make pronouns stop, right?
Just to make pronouns work. That's really the only reason it works that way. So we believe in one God that created all of existence out of his love for creation. And we believe that sort of all these religions of God were created from God and sent via his messengers. Baha'is refer to these people as messengers of God or manifestations of God, signs of God.
So there's been more than just Christ. Like again, the vast majority of the people watching this video are either Christian or familiar with Christianity.
Right.
So I'm going to try to tell it from a Christian perspective in that sense.
Right.
So you're saying that there have been more Christs?
Sort of, yes.
Okay.
So Baha'is believe that as long as humans have existed, these messengers of God have existed. So with the metaphorical first one being Adam. And throughout humanity's existence, God has always sent these major figures, these major prophets, these messengers to humanity, basically to say, this is what I want you to be doing now. And then 1,000 years later, well, now. So those sorts of things sort of, they brought slightly different messages depending on the needs of humanity at the time. But all the major things were all the same.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, you're saying, so for instance, when Buddha was around, like the message that needed to be taught was selflessness, because that's a lot of what the Buddhist writings are about.
Right.
And then Christianity was love, Islam was order, and the list goes on and on, probably even like Hinduism too, right?
Exactly. So the way that Baha'is sort of view religion is that there's really only one religion, and that is the religion of God, of which all these messengers are different teachers of that one religion throughout history, into prehistory possibly, because we don't have recordings past a certain...
Like something with, like, say, the Greek gods and goddesses, there might have been something there, but we don't know enough about it. Right?
Exactly. Potentially there was a messenger that started some kind of spiritual awakening back then, but we really just don't know.
It's too old.
Exactly. It is extremely old. So from the Baha'is perspective, as far back as we can go with history, if you start with the metaphorical Adam, then you just have the first human being, sort of first group of humans underneath Adam. And then you have probably the oldest recorded one that Baha'is believe in is Abraham.
What about Hinduism, Krishna, and all that? Wouldn't that be
older? So Abraham and Hinduism, I suppose, probably Hinduism before Abraham. Okay. I'd have to look more at the timelines myself before making those. But so we're going back basically as far as...
I think I get the picture on and on and on. But I talked to someone else about this recently, and they were like, so what, are like Baha'is just afraid of getting it wrong? so basically, we'll just believe everything, you know? Yeah.
Well, so no, that is not the case. We have our own sets of laws and our own sets of beliefs about how, you know, the physical and spiritual world works.
So you have your own stuff. It's not just, let's just support everything. And
no. But we do believe in the divinity of these different religions, that they came from the same God, that the central core of each of these religions are all the same and of divine.
Okay, so I feel you. And that's something that I always thought. It's like, why would some deity that is supposedly bigger and better than us, if supposedly if they exist, why would they pick sides? Like, why would it be like, well, the Jews got it right, so all you guys are screwed, sorry.
Well, if you look at the similarities between all these different religions, there's far more similarities than there are differences. And when it boils down to it, at least for me, logically it would make sense that perhaps, especially since many of them are revealed stagnated throughout history, perhaps they're all just part of their own evolving, progressive revelation.
Okay. Now to get back kind of to the original question, let's talk about, was it, you had the Bab, and then who was the...
Baha'u'llah.
Baha'u'llah, okay.
So the founders of the Bahá'í Faith, we have the Bab, who founded the Bahá'í Faith, and Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah was himself a Babi, and when the Bab was martyred, and some years later, Baha'u'llah made his claim that he was this person who, in the Babi writings, was foretold to be the one... So
some guy just said, I'm Christ, you should just listen to me, and everyone was like, okay, that's cool. Or what, like, how did that come about?
Well, so this is a bit of a history of the faith. Well, so if you go back to the beginning of the Babi religion, it's sort of the Bahá'í Faith and the Babi Faith sort of grew out of Islam. We don't consider ourselves an offshoot, but an independent religion. So you're looking sort of at the Bab starting a religion or a movement, and basically
saying that, you know, God's coming, you should prepare.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then this really prominent Babi, who was in and among all the disciples of the Bab, and they all sort of like
kind of knew who he was.
Yeah, he was everyone knew of him, and he was a noble in Persia at the time. He made a claim to being this figure, and sort of things seemingly lined up with different...
it's like the stars aligned. God was like, yeah, you know, you got this, bro. I'm, you know, like, I mean, I'm overly simplifying, but, you know, basically...
Those sorts of things.
Yeah, okay.
And almost all of the Babis accepted Baha'u'llah as being this person, this figure who was foretold.
All right. I think, and then you mentioned something that there was one other person, kind of like the three people. Who was the person after I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the names again.
After Baha'u'llah?
Yeah, who was after Baha'u'llah?
So of the major like manifestations of God, you have the Bab and Baha'u'llah. As far as how the Bahá'í Faith emerged and grew, Baha'u'llah appointed his son, Abdu'l-Bahá, as the center of his covenant, the person to sort of continue on the faith after he passed away.
Okay.
And then Abdu'l-Bahá appointed his grandson, Shoghi Effendi, as the beloved guardian of the Bahá'í Faith, who sort of protected and made sure that the faith continued to expand, and this would have been in the 1900s to 1940s era. And then after Shoghi Effendi, there was the elected Universal House of Justice, which is what we have now, sort of guiding the faith, and they were elected in the 1950s.
Okay. Well, I think we'll talk a little bit more about the House of Justice later in our interview, but this kind of segues into my next question, which are, what are the central beliefs of the faith, like the major tenets? Because you mentioned, like, it's a relatively new faith. We should know what all of these figureheads said and what they wanted, right? It's
right.
The whole kind of mysticism that is associated with the Bible and the Quran, where it's like we're not exactly sure 100% what was going on.
Right.
So what do these people say about, you know, their faith?
Well, so I guess the first thing that I should bring up is that stored in the archives of the Bahá'í Faith in Haifa, Israel, are the actual writings of Baha'u'llah.
we like, okay, there's no Dead Sea Scrolls, sort of. We don't know what Jesus really said because we can't find it. We actually have the writings of the person who said, it's like, you know, it's done.
In either his script or in his secretary's script. Okay. Literally.
No figuratively stuff here. Literally. Okay. And I know I said I had a kind of a tagline I'm going to put on Reddit where I talk about science in your faith.
Right.
You actually follow scientific thought in this faith. It's not separate like Christianity, kind of like, there's no evolution, no.
Right, so the Bahá'í Faith, one of our main tenets is the harmony of science and religion. That they are two different sides of the same coin that just describe different sides of our reality. So there's sort of this thing you might hear different Baha'is say, religion without science is just superstition. And science without religion or some kind of ethical framework can become a source of destruction. They are both necessary pieces of sort of describing how our world and how our lives function and exist.
So if I were to say Baha'is believe in evolution?
Yes, we do believe in evolution.
Baha'is
we take it from a different premise, but we do believe in evolution.
You basically believe that there was a divine being that started the whole process, but you believe that the process is something that
definitely happens.
That definitely
happens.
It happens, yeah.
Yes.
There's no kid hams in the Baha'i faith, right? The world's 2,000 years old and all this crazy shenanigans.
No, we're definitely of the opinion that 13 billion years ago or so, the universe began.
Okay. Yeah, that.
Or at least I am.
So before we move on, is there any other major tenets you want to talk about, like with the faith?
So we've touched on the fact that Baha'is believe in one God.
In all the religions.
Right. We believe
what was that called? You told me earlier.
We call it progressive revelation. Okay. That at sort of each religion has revealed something more along the way. Progressive revelation.
Okay.
And then, so I suppose the third thing that we believe in is the oneness of humanity. That no matter who you are, black, white, male, female, doesn't matter. We are equal before God, and spiritually equal. It doesn't mean we don't necessarily all have different roles to play in our lives, but we are all equal and are held to the same laws.
You said something, okay, so it doesn't matter if I'm a man, woman, black, white, whatever, but what about, to my atheists out there, what about people who that are not faithful, that like don't practice any religion?
Right. So that's not to say that, let me start.
Okay.
There is not necessarily anything that will happen badly to you unless you've acted badly.
So is it kind of like, I mean, overly simplifying for time,
Right.
Baha'is kind of believe in the golden rule for when it comes to weighing a soul, if a soul exists, and all that. So basically, good beget good, bad beget bad, kind of thing.
In many different ways. We Baha'is believe in an afterlife, but it's sort of this thing where if you develop your spiritual capabilities like love, justice, service, mercy, you're going to be okay, because these are the things that are necessary for our existence in the next life. It's not sort of like this whole you got damned because you didn't believe in the correct form.
You weren't X religion.
Exactly.
You're screwed.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've always thought that was complete utter BS. Goodness.
So it's one of those situations where it's like, did you develop the capability to love other people? Yes. Cool. You've got your eyes.
Yeah.
These are the things that are necessary for our existence. If you don't develop them, well, then you just lost your chance to develop them.
Okay. Well, and again, before we move on, any other thing we want to talk about when it comes to beliefs? Very generally across the board,
Right.
not super detailed.
Well, not super detailed. That's really most of where it goes. There are other small things that Baha'is work towards because of those main three tenets. But other than that, that's really how it sort of boils down.
And we can, again, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, I probably say it somewhere in the comments at some point, but there will be more on this faith, because I find it extremely interesting. Then will there be other interviews that are more detailed than this one. This is just the 101 beginning interview. But anyway, so the next question I have here is, do Baha'is go to church or temple like other religions?
So Baha'is, we have Baha'i centers in different areas, in different localities. That's not to say that they are necessary or are written into our scripture anywhere, but we have Baha'i centers where Baha'is tend to congregate and we hold different functions. The Baha'i faith is very much a personal religion, so we have no clergy. It's up to each individual Baha'i.
Can I stop you for a moment? My big thing, and the reason why I am more a-religious and I find religion interesting, but the reason why I don't actually practice as much is because I think that clergy in all these different religions basically are politicking their faiths, and the fact that you say that the Baha'i faith doesn't have a central clergy sort of like what we say goes, and this is, it is very refreshing compared to other religions. Because I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that have had a negative experience with a church or a religion in general, or figureheads of said religion, or well, screw you guys, I'm just going to be a-religious now. For me, that's a big turnoff in a religion.
Right. So Rainn Wilson was sort of quoted as saying that the Baha'i faith is probably the most disorganized of the organized religions. We do have sort of an administrative order that handles the administrative things of the Baha'i faith, how we function on an international scale. I guess this is a good time to talk about the modern Baha'i faith and the Universal House of Justice.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, we have an administrative order at the top on the international scale. We have the Universal House of Justice, which is elected every 5 years by all the national spiritual assemblies that exist within the world. The national spiritual assemblies are elected once a year from delegates that are sent from all the local communities.
So you're saying that your faith has democracy? This is some multi-level stuff here. It's not only faith, but it's a belief system that, I guess, propagates equality in politics and stuff too.
Right. So yeah, I suppose if you want to think of it that way, we're a democratic faith. But the interesting thing about it is
well, I mean, I know there's hard things in the faith with the writings, but
exactly,
you are a democratic.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, we are a democratic faith. But what's interesting is that the administrative order was set up in Baha'u'llah's writings. He set out how it should work and envisioned it. Abdu'l-Bahá expanded it and cleared some things up, and Shoghi Effendi actually executed it. So almost all of the national spiritual assemblies that were needed to elect the Universal House of Justice were in place by the time Shoghi Effendi passed away. So going back to how the faith is set out, after the national level, we have our local spiritual assemblies, which are elected by all Baha'is 21 years of age or older in the local communities.
Okay. That's so different than anything in any other faith I've ever heard of.
Right.
And that's what like draws me to wanting to learn more of your faith, is because it's not this religious, super harsh dogma like my experiences I've had with Christianity and what I've seen in the world when Islam, and like, you know, I mean, I'm not as well versed in Islam as I am because I grew up in Christianity, but it just seems like it's super rigid, and the Baha'i Faith doesn't seem like that, excluding obviously your core tenets of both faiths.
Right, right. It's just sort of interesting how everything's laid out. And since we don't have a clergy, everything is about reading and learning on your own and taking your interpretation and consulting with other Baha'is and non-Baha'is to expand your view and understanding.
And that's one thing, like, again, Christian background, even though I'm not really that Christian anymore, Christ advocated that.
Right.
Over, like, that's one reason why I was so, like, why Paul set up this megachurch after Christ was, like, you know, champion private worship. Like, it was such a contradiction.
You know, so it's also interesting that in the Baha'i Faith we're encouraged to ask questions. In fact, we see it as one of the attributes of God that we are, as human beings, trying to emulate. It is one of our human virtues. Question things. Ask questions. The more questions you ask, the better.
And that's, again, different from a lot of faiths, because it's like, you know, there's those images online where it's like science and it shows a scientific method, and then religion, it's like, write a book 2,000 years ago, shenanigans belief.
Right.
Like, you know, there's more to it in Baha'i Faith.
Yeah, Baha'u'llah on his own tablets, a number of different places, says things like, arise yourself and question the claims that I've given, or seek to understand the claims that I've
And I know so many people who have been punished for doing that in other faiths. That's amazing. Let's see what else I have here. We already talked about the administrative structure. We talked about science. Is there any other, like, has there ever been any, like, conflict with science at all in the faith?
I don't necessarily know that the Baha'i Faith has really tried to insert itself into scientific understanding.
So basically, assuming the science is mainstream and credible, Baha'i Faith is 100% behind it? Is that what you're saying?
In general, yes. That doesn't necessarily mean that we agree with everything the scientific community has found or come to the same conclusions, but that does mean that we'll definitely give it a good, strong looking at. And take our time as individuals to make our own decisions.
And you won't, like, close your ears and be like, the Earth is 2,000 years old. Like, you know.
I can honestly say that almost every Baha'i that I've ever met could probably consider themselves a scientist.
Okay, that's great. And I guess the only thing I have left for you is, for this 101, is if I saw this video and was somewhat inspired by it, where could I find more information that wasn't like Wikipedia on this faith?
Right, right. That isn't to say that the Wikipedia articles aren't good. They're starred and locked. But that said, you can go to Baha'i.org for the International Baha'i site. You can call 1-800-22-UNITE if you are within the United States. There are Baha'is on the other end of that line waiting to talk to people.
What about scripture? Where can I purchase scripture at?
The Baha'i Publishing Trust in whatever national locality you're in is probably what you're going to look for there. You can just Google for that. But also be careful if you're just Googling for the Baha'i Faith, because you might not find the exact right thing. There really is only one Baha'i Faith. There aren't any offshoots. There aren't any different sects of the Baha'i Faith. There's simply the Baha'i Faith.
Okay. So there's no Catholicism versus Protestantism in the Baha'i Faith?
And it's sort of because of the way the Baha'i Faith is set up. There is simply the Baha'i Faith. That doesn't mean you won't find random blogs on the internet if you search for it. But Baha'i.org is probably the best place to start.
Okay. Now I'm going to talk to you guys, and basically we are at the end of this very intro interview, and I want to ask you to give me questions. I want to basically grill this guy, like talk about the evils of the world and what the Bahá'í Faith feel, and we can kind of move forward with that in the next interview. Because I mean, there's a lot of things we didn't talk about. There's like, you know, the things that Christianity seems to pick at. There's all these other things that we didn't touch. This is just the basic intro. We're going to talk about this faith video. And now the 102 video that I'm going to release at some point later, I want you to comment questions wherever this video is posted. Give us feedback, what kind of questions you want in this next video. I think that's about it. I don't think there's anything else that I would like to say. Is there anything you want to say before we end the video?
Keep an open mind and keep questioning.
All right. So, I'm Asworth. You have a good day, good health, peace. All right. So, we're at the outro. And basically, please, guys, give us as many questions as you can so we can make this series as good as it humanly possible. Again, I want him to be in a hot seat. And if you, somewhere below me, you'll see two videos. One being why good food is good for you. It's what helped me lose weight. Watch it, help you with your that kind of issues. Or you will find why there's a problem with the GMO movement and the food of the future, in my opinion. And if you check out both those videos, why don't you subscribe? And if you've done all of those things, number one, you're awesome. But number two, why don't you check out Baha'i.org and find out some more information about this very interesting faith. And see ya.